Once upon a time, there lived a man well versed in all the fields of knowledge and possessing great wealth. But he was without Atmajnana or self realization. He undertook the search for Chintamani, the precious gem, with much effort and tapas. Chintamani is a gem which is supposed to yield anything that is thought of. When the gem appeared before him, he was doubtful as to whether it was the real gem. For how else could such a lowly person as he succeed? In such doubt, he let go of a great opportunity and the gem vanished from his view. He started the search again by wandering in all directions. Some Siddhas, hidden from his view, dropped an earthenware bracelet, which was eagerly picked up by the victim. Believing it to be real gem, he gave up all his wealth and retired to the forest with an intention of avoiding such persons with depraved tendencies. Thus, he subjected himself to all kinds of hardships, degrading himself to the lowest level. Continuing, the Muni narrated another story. In the heart of a great forest, there lived an elephant, one of the largest and the strongest kind. Its tusks were exceedingly strong, long and sharp, taking note of which some mahouts in the forest trapped it and bound it with strong chains. Becoming infuriated with the painful fetters, it shook itself free with the aid of its powerful tusks. The mahouts sitting above felt giddy and fell to the ground. The tuskers, finding the mahout fallen on the ground, passed by without hurting him. But the mahout, picking himself up and in an angry mood, went again in quest of the elephant. Digging a trench in the area frequented by the elephant, he covered it with dry leaves and grass. The elephant fell into the trench and was instantly bound by the mahout. Thus, the poor creature was again subjected to torture. Likewise, those who make no inquiry into good and evil come to grief. When Shikidwaja wanted to know the hidden meaning behind the story Kumbhamuni had narrated in all compassion, that Shikidwaja was like a rich man who, though acquainted with all the Shastras, was without the beneficent Tattvajnana and hence had gone in search of Chintamani. For although well versed in book learning, Shikidwaja had not yet developed equilibrium of mind. In order to attain true renunciation, which is the true Chintamani, he had forsaken his regality, wife and other relatives and had come to the forest. While the true renunciation had been developing in him little by little, even while in the world, and he was misled by the wrong conception of renunciation. The present renunciation was not a true one, and he had lost track of it, and he was being misled by the false idea of tapas, which had afflicted his body and mind. Kumbhamuni added that the wise say that those who reject the happiness available to them in their daily lives and allow the mind to search for imaginary and strange things are only self-destructive. The adjective elephant was applied to Shikidwaja himself. The long tusks are Vairagya and Viveka. Ajnana or ignorance is the mahout who sits upon the elephant to goad it. It afflicted him in many ways. The iron chains are the bonds of desires which are stronger and longer lasting than iron. The breaking of chains and the fall of mahout represents the act of overcoming the ignorance through Viveka and Vairagya. The ignorance continues to hover around as the delusion of wealth is replaced by asceticism, unless one continues to nurture true renunciation through Viveka and Vairagya. thinking that he had achieved true renunciation by giving up his regality and making the forest his home, he had become complacent. The Muni asked as to why he had ignored the words of delicate Chudala and thus rejected true renunciation. And now begins one of the most dramatic and eye-opening dialogues which gives a great hint in spirituality: true renunciation. Shikidwaja interposed. He had given up his kingdom, his palace, his wealth, and even his dear wife. Did not all these actions constitute perfect renunciation? Kumbhamuni replied that though he had given up these things, it did not constitute true renunciation. He still had attraction for objects. Unless one gave up attraction completely, bliss cannot arise. The king in exile said that if giving up worldly things did not comprise of true renunciation, and that still he had attraction for objects, what was left was the forest alone, full of hills and trees, and so he was giving up the liking for the forest in which he dwelt. Kumbhamuni said again, even abandoning of the hilly and luxuriant forest was not true renunciation, that still he had some painful desires. Only when the king had succeeded in eliminating them would he have true renunciation, to which recluse Shikidwaja said that he was laying aside his cloth, his Rudrakshamala, deer skin, earthen vessels, and the water gourd, thus confining them to the flames. Rejoicing in his new understanding of renunciation, and denuded of all possessions, including the cloth to cover his nakedness, he turned to Kumbhamuni in all gratefulness, for he did derive a kind of joy after the action. Kumbhamuni smiled in all compassion and said that in spite of the actions, Shikidwaja had not renounced anything, and still delusion afflicted him. The seeker Shikidwaja reflected that the only thing he could call his own was the body composed of the 5 elements and the organs. If he gave that up, perhaps he would succeed in tasting true renunciation. So thinking, the great renouncer Shikidwaja ascended to a tall summit and was about to cast himself down when Kumbhamuni, catching hold of his wrist, stopped him from committing the foolish action. He asked whether the body had been of any hindrance in his progress, and how could death possibly be of any help. He added that even if he were to behave like an angry bull on a tender calf and jumped off the cliff, he would not succeed in true renunciation. Compassionately, he said that if one gave up that which is the cause of all agitation in the body, and which is the seed of all births and action, true renunciation would result. The words had a healing touch on the being of Shikidwaja, who appealed to the Muni to reveal the means by which one could avoid the cause of agitation. The Muni replied, the wise say that Chittam, through its Sankalpa, manifests under the different manifestations of Prana and Jiva, is the real cause of gross as well as the subtle universe, and hence the attachment to delusive objects. Therefore, true renunciation lies in giving up this Chittam. All other renunciations cause suffering, and with true renunciation, the self identifies with Brahman, bringing about peace and perfect quiescence. The state of mind Shikidwaja before and after the dramatic event is worth noting. Before, he had taken his renunciation for granted. He had been He had even taken his eligibility for receiving the truth for granted. The enlightened sage's comment and his subsequent reactions to it shattered his notions, and his slate was clean again. The field was stilled and devoid of any unwanted weeds. The Guru could plant the seed of truth in it now. When Shikhidwaja asked the Muni to continue the discourse by telling him the cause of Chittam, its true nature, and the means of overcoming it, the compassionate Kumbha Muni replied, "True nature of mind is the vasanas. So much so, both are synonymous. But the idea of I is the source and seed of the tree of mind. The sprout which germinates first from the seed of Ahankara originates without form and ascertainable only by internal experience. When this sprout becomes determinate, it is termed as buddhi. From this, the ramifying branches like sankalpa take their origin. As a result of such differentiation, chittam, manas, and other functions emanate from ahankara. These functions in turn give birth to innumerable branches called vasanas. One can either cut the vasanas one by one or destroy the seed itself. The seed can be destroyed by the fire of Atmajnana, which inquires into the true nature of I. Shikhidwaja was immediately driven towards vichara. He inquired into the origin of I. As the world is non-intelligent, it cannot be I, nor the body, nor the organs, nor the contemplating manas, nor the buddhi, nor the injurious ahankara. Supervising the vichara, Kumbha Muni interposed by asking that if I was not all these, then what else is it? To which Shikhidwaja replied that he was of the nature of that stainless, absolute consciousness which, having evolved everything, preserves as well as destroys it. He was unable to find the cause of this I and could not thrust it aside. At the same time, he must do so. Kumbha Muni, of infinite patience and compassion, urged him to move further in to seek the cause of ahankara, which is ever present. He added that since ahankara is also an effect, it has to have a cause. The disciple, entering further within, said the cause of ahankara is Vedanam, or knowledge, which arises when there are visible objects, which are the effects of Chetyonmukhata, or the tendency of thought that brings about misery. How can one bring about the quiescence of Chittan to overcome the misery? In the gloss of 2 shlokas, Vasishta Chandrika offers the cause of misery as Ahamiti doshasya ahankarasya vedanam chittaschethyonmukhatvamena karanam vedmi. Chittaschetanyasya chetyonmukhatvam drishyánusandhanam tena hetuna ayam ahamkaro dukkhaya stitah. I have understood that awareness of the limitation called ahankara is due to Chetyonmukhata. Chetyonmukhata is the diversion of Chaitanya or consciousness towards Drishya or the seen, due to which ahankara remains in misery. The Guru commented that the visible things do not really exist and asked him to seek the basis of bodha. In reply, the disciple said that with the perception of forms like body, etc., arises vastu satta, the awareness of impermanent things like that of the touch of breeze. But this awareness is due to ahankara. How can it be impermanent? This very doubt shows that even after so much effort, Shikidwaja could retrieve his consciousness up to ahankara, beyond which he was finding it very difficult. Ahankara is like a scale forming on the consciousness due to the identification with action. More the identification, more thick will be the scale or covering. Acharya Shankara, in his Viveka Chudamani, attributes two functional qualities to ahankara: avarana, or the covering of truth, and vikshiptata, the scattering of consciousness. Shikidwaja had managed to overcome the vikshiptata through tapas and renunciation. But by the very acts of tapas and vairagya, his ahankara had become stronger. The ahankara as such is always directed without, due to which it is able to be aware of only its manifestations like buddhi, manas and body, and never itself. Understanding the state of Shikidwaja, Kumbha Muni urged him to look further within by saying that all the faculties starting from ahankara are only superimposed entities, like the rope being misunderstood as the snake, and are all effects. He must look within for the cause of these, to which the king asked an apparently unconnected question. Is not Brahma, who is the first ancestor, the cause of the world? The preceptor replied the question patiently. In the beginning, only Brahman which is alone, tranquil and supreme exists. It is without the second, due to which it is without any cause. Being without the second, how can there be the actor and the experiencer? The universe is self-created. The supreme or the first sankalpa of that absolute consciousness is Brahma. Mythologically, Brahma is supposed to have brought about this creation and has his own time period. But Vedanta interprets it differently. Brahma, the creator, is attributed with 4 heads. Each head represents a faculty: ahankara, buddhi, chittam and manas. As far as the individual is concerned, there can be no creation for her or him unless these faculties function. He is supposedly manifested from the lotus, from the navel of Vishnu, the all-pervasive principle. Lotus, as such, symbolizes consciousness. So the cause of Brahma is consciousness, which is all-pervasive. Still unable to understand, Shikidwaja sought further clarification. Chit or consciousness alone is the cause from which all effects get manifested, in which they survive and into which they merge. They have their existence only due and in the consciousness, and no separate existence. To transcend the manifestations, one has to be in the mood of I am not the doer, I am not the experiencer. Everything is peaceful and unmoving. With such a mood, ajnana, which is the hold of ahankara over its manifestations, gets loosened. That which is named as Brahman is nothing but the quiescent, unmanifest or passive state of this universe. With these potent suggestions of Kumbha Muni, Shikidwaja gratefully acknowledged that all his doubts are dissolved and that he had experienced the clarity of vision. He said that he had succeeded in worshipping his real self, and that he was in a position to stand aside ahankara and its other manifestations. Kumbha Muni added the final advice to his beloved disciple by saying, all the manifestations, including Ahankara, and the external universe are differentiated aspects of that One. The One is not experienced due to the ancient and stubborn habit of making distinction. The habit can be overcome by just changing the vision. With these suggestions, Shikidwaja achieved quiescence. Sri Ramakrishna has said, the darkness of centuries is disposed as soon as a light is brought into a room. The accumulated sins of countless lives vanish by a single glance of God. Sage Vasishta said that Shikidwaja attained the radiating jnana at that very instant, releasing himself from the fold of Maya. Through his Guru's grace, he got absorbed in the Brahmic state. Being freed from the activity of mind, senses, and speech in an instant, became totally free and expansive. After being absorbed in the state of Nididhyasana for quite some time, he came back to normal state of consciousness. Observing that Shikidwaja had had a glimpse into that state, Chudala, in the form of Kumbhamuni, inquired whether the king had enjoyed the state beyond all pain, the blissful, immaculate, and beneficent Brahmic state. Shikidwaja replied, in grateful tears of joy, that through his Guru's grace he was able to cognize the state of Brahman which remains after all else is over. At the same time, he did not know why he was unable to attain the state which is ever available before. Kumbhamuni replied that only when the mind is quiescent and is indifferent towards all experiences, the mind becomes receptive to the words of Guru. Otherwise, such words, though potent, drop down like fruits of the tree. So saying, he blessed the disciple to be a great Mauni and alone, that is, totally free of the dependency on the involvement for being in this world. Shikidwaja sought a clarification. Are not the actions of Jivan Muktas performed through the mind? How can things go on without the mind being active? To which Kumbhamuni replied that the mind is only a receptacle of vasanas which generate rebirths. But if one knows the real self, as it is in the case of Jivana Muktas, there is no fear of rebirth. The mind is free of vasanas, is called sattva, but the mind without jnana is termed chittam, which is full of desires. That is, chittam is guided by desires, while the sattva is guided by the jnana. Having mingled spanda or activity and aspanda or non-activity into one, the knowers of the self merge into the eternal. Vasishta Chandrika, giving clarification to these two words, says, Spanda chittasya bahi prasara aspanda samadhi tavekatam nitva sarvada swarupānusandhānena vikshepava bhedam nitva shashvatam nityatyaikam brahmadvaita tagatya yathakamam tishtha. Spanda is the spreading mental activity directed outside, and aspanda is samadhi devoid of any activity. Both these are to be transcended by holding on to the One, which is aware of both spanda and aspanda through anusandhanam, by directing the attention towards the permanent, beyond the spreading and the non-spreading. To the doubt how to transcend activity and non activity, the sage continued, like the waves of water in an ocean, all the universes are nothing but the non dual Chinmatra or absolute consciousness. On this Chinmatra, when there is slight activity of dhi or pure mind, the spandana or fluctuation is caused, like the water moving due to waves. The ignorant, without nishtha or capacity to look within, regard the supreme principle going by several names of Shiva, the auspicious, Chinmatra, Satyam or truth, and Brahman as the universe characterized by multiplicity. The creation is nothing but a spandana or the absolute consciousness which dissolves with samyak drishti, vision characterized by non-involvement. But when there is involvement, the reality gets superimposed by the multiple universe as the conception of snake getting superimposed on a piece of rope in twilight. When one directs one's effort on the import of Shastras with a steady mind, seeking the company of the experienced wise, and practices diligently, Dana Jnana dawns. Concluding the discourse, Kumbhamuni said that he had told Shikidwaja whatever is necessary for attaining the ultimate state, saying that now he had to proceed to Swargaloka for meeting his father and preceptor Narada. He disappeared from the scene. Shikidwaja marvelled at the way in which he had missed the state while it had always been available to him. Shikidwaja, who had approached the state, was without any fluctuation entered into it, while Kumbhamuni resumed the gentle form of Chudala and reached her chamber in the palace and resumed the noble cause of ruling the subjects with love and care. Action has binding effect on the mind. When one is too action oriented, as it was in the case of Shikidwaja, there is identification with action, and naturally the ahankara also gets stronger. Such persons find it extremely difficult to achieve antarmukhata. Shikidwaja was identified with his kinship and all the responsibilities, duties, as well as the pleasures with it, turned his face away from them to identify himself with tapasvin or the seeker. He had not been able to get rid of his habit of identification. Because of the habit, he constantly remembered what all things he had given up. Though he had given them up physically, mentally they were very near to him, if not closer than they were when he was involved with them. That was why it was necessary to bring him to the level of preparedness for giving up his very life. Actually, what happens at such time is that one feels the total uselessness of all egotic associations, uselessness of all actions performed by and through ahankara. So, unless the ahankara is dissolved, nothing can happen, and paradoxically, it is the ahankara alone which wants to achieve something, be it an object or position of enjoyment or enlightenment. Sannyasa gives a great hint through the following mantra. Tyaja dharmam adharmancha ubhe satyan rite tyaja ubhe satyan rite tyaktva yena tyajasi tatyaja. Give up the dharma or righteousness as well as adharma or unrighteousness. Give up both satyam or truth and ritam or order. Having given up satyam and ritam, give up that with which you give up. Having given up satyam and ritam, give up that with which you give up. We do not know for sure whether Huiko really cut off his hand and threw it in front of Bodhidharma. But the Zen anecdotes are symbolic rather than historical facts. Hand symbolizes action. When Huiko cut his hand and threw it, it only means that he had stopped being a karta or doer by disidentifying with all action, and he was ready to give up his head, which symbolizes ahankara. The beauty is, when one has stopped being a karta, one has already cut off the head. What remains is to offer it at the altar of enlightenment. But strange as it may seem, that then there is no altar, but only enlightenment.